Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining me today. So, I'm Natalie MacLees. I'm founder of Aardvark, which is an accessibility testing platform. And I do these live streams every other Wednesday afternoon. Well, afternoon my time. I'm in beautiful, sunny California, and it is like probably 80 degrees here today, and blue sky. It's wonderful. I hope it's beautiful wherever you are. And it is 1 p.m. So I hope you're having a beautiful day too. So every other Wednesday, I come on, I do a live stream. We talk about different accessibility topics. And this week is a special stream because tomorrow is Global Accessibility Awareness Day. And so we're going to do a special stream talking about why accessibility helps everyone. So usually the streams are pretty hands-on. We look at code, we really dig into how to do testing or how to write code in certain ways. We test out, vibe coding and seeing if we can get an accessible result from that. But today, in honor of GAAD, we're going to just do a presentation, and it is for all levels. So if you don't know anything about code, you just own a website, or you have a business with a website, or you want your business to have a website, whatever it is, welcome. This talk will be helpful for you no matter what level you are. We're just going to be talking about accessibility in general and how we can kind of reframe it in our minds to help make it more ubiquitous and to help get the word out across the world that accessibility is something we should be thinking about, and it should be something that we are implementing when we are building new websites, new web apps, new mobile apps, etc. So thank you for joining me today, and happy GAD. Happy GAD tomorrow. I'm sure you will see tons of things. We'll talk about GAD a little bit in the talk a little bit later, but I'm sure you'll see lots and lots of different GAD events happening today, tomorrow, Friday, etc. The accessibility community really gets into it. It's one of our favorite days of the year. All right, so without any further ado, let me go ahead and get started here. All right, so why accessibility helps everyone. Oops, let me just move my microphone cable out of my way. All right, there we go. All right, so I'd like for you to just pause for a moment and think that when I say to you, your website, your web application, your mobile app, whatever it happens to be, has users who are disabled, and you think about those users who are disabled, what do you see? Like, what are you thinking about when you think about a user with disabilities? So I think if most people are being honest, they picture one of two things, which is users who are blind or people who are wheelchair users. And that picture is incomplete, and we're going to talk about that a little bit today. We're going to dig into who actually those users are, and we're going to talk about who actually benefits from accessible design when we make the effort to build things to be accessible. All right, so personally, have you ever turned on captions to watch a show if you were in a loud, crowded space? Or, like, alternatively, turned on captions to watch a show because you didn't want to bother your partner, your roommate, your sleeping baby, whatever happens to be. Have you ever asked a voice assistant something while your hands were full or otherwise busy? Have you ever tabbed through a form rather than using the mouse because it was faster and easier to do? So each one of those things is an accessibility feature. So most likely you have been using one or more accessibility features all along, and you may not have even realized that those were originally designed for people with disabilities. And then you came along and found it helpful as well. So what we're going to walk away with today at the end of this talk is we're going to understand why accessibility helps everyone and how that is just a description of how the web should work and not just a slogan. We're going to talk about the persona spectrum framework and why it can help make the business case for accessibility easier. So if you happen to be a designer, a developer, you're user experience professional, and you're building things for clients and you're trying to figure out how do I get them on board with this accessibility thing, the persona spectrum framework will help with that. And everybody's going to walk away with 3 concrete things that you could do this week to celebrate GAAD. So 3 things you could do, even if you don't know code, even if you're not technical, to make your website a little bit more accessible. All right, let's go and look at the roadmap. We're going to talk about GAAD for a minute because I think it's important. So we'll figure out where GAAD came from, what it's all about. We'll talk about that persona spectrum. We'll talk about the curb cut effect, and we'll talk about what all of this changes about how you build when you're building digital things. And I'll give you those 3 things that you can do this week. All right, so since GAAD is tomorrow, let's talk about that first. So where did GAAD come from? Like who made this? Why? How'd we get here? So let's talk about it. The origin story of GAAD. Joe Devon is a web developer, and he published a blog post in November of 2011. And he issued a challenge to get accessibility know-how from mainstream developers. So, the developer influencers who were publishing tutorials and videos and things like that, they weren't ever including accessibility, or maybe not ever, but most of the time, right? They're not including accessibility. Honestly, in 2026, I think that's still true, unfortunately. And he issued this challenge because he said, most developers, they have no idea where to start. They didn't learn this as part of their education. They didn't learn how to make things accessible as part of their education. So we have to start, we got to do this ourselves, basically. And I think we should all start doing it. And then as a result, Jennison Asuncion, who's an accessibility professional, he saw that blog post, got in touch with Joe, and together they picked May 9th. So that would have been May 9th of 2012. They decided was going to be the first Global Accessibility Awareness Day. It was small and scrappy. It probably only had maybe a few hundred participants, maybe at the most, right? But they stuck with it and they turned it into something really big. So after the first 2 years, they picked an official constant day, which is the 3rd Thursday of May. So it is always on the 3rd Thursday of May. So don't get confused when it has a different date next year. It has a different date each year, but it is always on the 3rd Thursday of May. And it's been that way now for 12 years, I think. And of course, Global Accessibility Awareness Day, no longer small and scrappy. It is huge. You'll see pretty much every accessibility professional out there participating in it tomorrow. And I know I'm not the only one starting today. I saw other people having live streams and webinars and things like that today. And people have been doing it all week, I'm sure, and will continue doing special things on Friday. And for the most part, in the spirit of GAAD, those events, just so you know, they're all free, all educational. Sometimes it's panels. Sometimes they've had a bunch of people answer a question on video, and then they put that all together into a big video. And there are courses being taught, all kinds of things. You can go to accessibility.day and get the whole list of all the events happening for GAAD and participate in whatever you want. Sometimes they're in-person events, so you may have some kind of in-person thing wherever you are. A lot of them are also online. So if you don't want to leave your home or you can't leave your home, you can still participate in lots of different GAAD events. And of course, we see companies, little companies that maybe you've heard of, like Apple, Google, Microsoft, Meta, all participating in GAAD tomorrow. And you'll see lots of web developers participating in it as well. And the whole point is to just get more people aware that accessibility is something we ought to be thinking about, talking about, and actually implementing. All right, and why 14 years later does GAAD still matter? Why do we still have GAAD after 14 years? Well, we see the number of accessibility lawsuits in the United States continuing to go up year after year after year. So we know websites are not accessible. We have different laws taking effect, different policies around the world. An example is the European Accessibility Act, which went into effect June of last year. And we also see the rise of vibe coding and AI generated code showing up everywhere. And most of that is not accessible. So I mentioned that already. You can take a look at my past streams where we tried vibe coding to see if we could get an accessible result. And mostly, unless you explicitly ask for it and explicitly instruct the model to create accessible code, it's not what you get. So that's something to be aware of. All right, let's take a look at the trends of the web over time. So we have a nice benchmark, which is WebAIM, which is Web Accessibility in Mind. They're a nonprofit organization. Started a project in 2019 where they do a survey, basically. They take the top 1 million websites across the internet. They look at just the homepage. So that's important to know. They're just looking at the homepage, right? Like whatever you land on when you first go to that site, that's the page that they're testing. And they run that through their automated checker, right? They make that wave automated checker that you've probably used if you've used one. It's a really popular one. And they get back the results on, a big broad survey of all different types of websites, all different sizes of websites with all different purposes, all different designs, etc. So now we've got, 1 million of them that we're looking at data for. And what you see in the chart that I have on the screen is one particular statistic that comes out of the WebAIM Million every year, which is the percentage of those homepages that had detectable WCAG failures. So we do have to talk about that for a second because they are just running an automated scan because it's not super feasible to think someone's going to be able to do manual testing on 1 million homepages, right? So this is limited to just an automated checker and to the failures of WCAG that can be detected by an automated checker. So it's important to note that first. And then the other thing that we want to pay attention to is what's happening with those dots. So we see 2019 was the first year they did it. 2020 went up a little bit, so a slightly higher percentage of websites. So exactly the opposite of the trend we generally wanted to see. But then starting in 2021, we see a nice decline happening for 6 years in a row until 2026. So WebAIM Million gets announced, like they release that report around it's the end of April or beginning of May each year. So the 2026 report is hot off the press, and we have a disappointing result in that percentage of homepages with detectable WCAG2 failures returned to the 2024 numbers. So 6 years of decline followed by a bounce back this year. So a little bit of a discouraging result. And I have seen a few people suggest that this may be because of vibe coding or AI generated code. I haven't seen any statistics that actually prove that out, but it's not impossible, right? It's entirely possible. It's definitely plausible that could be contributing to it over time. So that is something that we have to think about. The other thing that we want to think about is that because manual testing wasn't completed on these websites, right, the conformance rate of these million websites is most certainly lower than 4.1%, right? So we cannot say that the remaining 4.1% of web pages are 100% conformant with WCAG because they have not been tested for most of the WCAG criteria. So that's another thing to keep in mind. The actual number that are conforming with WCAG is probably teeny tiny. I would not be surprised if it was well under 1%, But of course, it's impossible to actually have that data because we don't have people to do manual testing on a million homepages. So another little note about this chart is that the y-axis on that chart, and I'll go back to it to show you in a second, is only between 90 and 100%. So we're not talking about huge changes in the percentage of homepages with detectable failures. So the data for 2019 through 2026 lives entirely between 94 and 98%. So I could have set the y-axis literally to 94 to 98. So we're talking about teeny, teeny, tiny little changes. But because it is such a huge data set, like that is a useful trend, even though it's teeny tiny, right? So the very highest number there was, I think, 97.8. And the very, very lowest number was last year, and it was 94.8. So not a huge, huge swing in the numbers, but nevertheless, because it's such a huge sample size, it is a trend line that is worth following. All right, let's go ahead and dig into that persona spectrum that I talked about earlier. And this is adapted from Microsoft. They have a tool called the Inclusive Design Toolkit. It'll be linked from the resources for this video, so I'll share the slides after the talk. And that will include the resources slide that tells you where the information all came from. And this gives us a different way to think about disability in general and who accessibility is for. All right, so first up, disability isn't a state that some people have and others don't. We have different types of disability. We have permanent, which is a disability that once acquired, a person will live with for the rest of their lives. They may have been born with it, but it could also be acquired later in life. We have temporary disabilities, which are some kind of injury or illness. And I don't know anybody, right, who has escaped being sick or injured at one point or another in their lives. So when we're talking about people who have experienced temporary disability, we are talking about basically 100% of people have been injured in some way or have gotten sick at some point or another in their lives in a severe enough way that it impacted their day-to-day life. All right, and then we have situational disabilities, which are the disabilities that have nothing to do with a person's mind or body, but have to do with the situation that they happen to be in at the time, or a context that they're dealing with. So let's take a look at some examples of what I mean by these different disabilities. So this is our persona spectrum, and I have a table on the screen. And across the top of the columns are permanent, temporary, and situational. So I have those three different types of disabilities. And then labeling the rows, kind of going down the left-hand side, I have different areas where disabilities might impact people. So we have mobility or motor disabilities, we have sight disabilities, hearing disabilities, and speaking disabilities. And I have an example filled in each one of the cells of the table right? So as an example of a permanent mobility or motor disability, you might only have one arm. You might only have one arm, or you might only have one arm that you can use in the typical kind of way, right? You're not going to grow an arm back. So that is definitely a permanent disability. In the temporary category, you might have a broken arm. You might have a sprained wrist. You might have a broken finger, right? And I'm focusing on your hands and wrists and arms because typically you don't use your legs or feet for operating websites or any kind of digital devices. So any kind of injury, right, from shoulders on down, right, is probably going to impact your ability to use your tablet or your phone or your computer in the way that you typically do, especially if it's your dominant hand, right? And then we have a situational disability, which I have the example of a new parent holding a baby, right? And we could think of that in a couple of different ways. So we could think about oh, a sleepy baby. Parent is, relaxed, holding the baby in a rocking chair and maybe scrolling Instagram with their other hand while their baby sleeps, right? So that's one possibility. But we also have the possibility of a sick, feverish baby who's screaming in one arm and a parent desperately looking for the doctor's phone number right with the other. So that situation could look a lot of different ways. But it doesn't really matter if it's a permanent, temporary, or situational disability. We basically have a situation where somebody needs to operate a device and they've only got one arm to do it. When we look at sight, a permanent disability, of course, would be someone who is blind. Temporary disability, you might be recovering from something like cataract surgery. You may have just come from the eye doctor and had those drops put in your eyes, right? So, some kind of temporary situation that impacts your vision. You may have a terrible migraine where you can't look at light of any kind and you just need to go be in a dark room. So, some kind of temporary sight disability. And then we could also have a situational disability. Maybe you're driving your car. You can't look at your phone and send a text because you're busy driving. So, we can't use our sight to operate a device right now, even if the device is sitting right there. For hearing, permanent disability, someone who is deaf or someone who is hard of hearing. For a temporary disability, maybe just a really bad ear infection, a sinus infection, something like that, or you went to a really loud concert last night, right? And then you have a day or two where you've got that weird feeling that there's like cotton in your ears. Or maybe you're a bartender and you're working a really busy shift and people are yelling at you, I want a soda water with lime, right? And you got to try to hear that over all the other people who are yelling their orders at you. Right, so challenging situation to be in to try to hear any kind of specific conversation in. For speaking disabilities, so permanent disability, people can be nonverbal. There's a wide range of different disabilities that could cause a loss of speech. Temporarily, you could have laryngitis. This happened to me just a couple of weeks ago. I went to a conference and got sick, and I ended up losing my voice. Situational, you might be somewhere where you have to be quiet and you can't speak. Right. So, like, I personally use a lot of voice dictation and voice control on my computer because I have some challenging RSI issues in my hands and wrists. I couldn't go set up in the library and do that. They would ask me to leave, right? If I was in there trying to talk to my computer all day long, that's not allowed. So, I have a situational situation where I can't speak. I use my computer that way. And let's take a look at some disability numbers because I do think that they're higher than a lot of people know or expect. So, according to the CDC in the United States, approximately 1 in 4 adults live with a disability, and that is roughly 100 million Americans. So, that is a lot of people. And when we look worldwide, the World Health Organization tells us that roughly 1 in 6 people globally are living with some kind of disability, which worldwide, that is 1 billion people. That is a lot of people. And if we think about that for a second, that's just the people in the permanent disability column. Once we add in the people in the temporary and the situational column, we're pretty much talking about everybody. And that's who benefits from accessibility. And of course, there are other things to think about, which is the longer you're on the planet, the longer you're around, the more likely you are to develop some kind of disability. That's typically what happens as we age. So you're just more and more likely to join this group of 1 billion people worldwide the longer you're here. So we're talking about if it's not you today, it could be future you, right? So I think this is an important way to kind of reframe how we think about who accessibility is for. because it's going to end up impacting everyone sooner or later. It's more an indicator of product quality, and having a product that is robust, that is usable by as many people as possible, that has as large of an audience as possible, that is empowering to as many people as possible. It is more about that than it is about trying to create something that is useful for this small little group, right? We can have the same code and we can have more users who are able to participate. So more users who have access to digital services, digital information, which is where our lives are these days, right? You can do almost anything online. You can apply for a job. You might even have a job working online, right? Like I'm in my house. I work from home. I do everything online. Like my whole job is online. I do all my shopping online. I do all of my banking online. I do all of my taxes online, right? Anytime that I access, social services of any kind, or like look up and see what events the Parks and Rec department are offering in my city, right? All of that I access online. And we want to make sure that everybody has equal access to those goods and services that are available online. So that's really important. All right, let's go ahead and talk about the curb cut effect, because I think this also helps to drive home how accessibility benefits everyone. So let's talk about curb cuts. So you've probably seen them. I've got a picture on the slide, where the sidewalk, kind of dips down to meet the street where there's a crosswalk is what we're talking about. Those are called curb cuts. And in the 1970s, we had disability advocates who fought really hard to get cities to install those at all of the street corners so that wheelchair users weren't trapped, right? They didn't have to try to negotiate getting their chair up and down over these big curbs, and they would be able to get around the city just fine. And they were largely successful. So I can't say that, every single intersection in every single city in the US has a curb cut, but a huge number of them do. And as cities are doing their street and sidewalk maintenance, we see more and more of them getting installed. In my own city, it was just a few years ago, actually, that they kind of did maintenance on all the sidewalks in the road of the kind of the main street that goes through town. And at every corner, they put two curb cuts, right, on each corner so that you could go either way off the curb. So those are really common. You've probably seen them. And what they found out after they installed those is that it wasn't only wheelchair users who were using those. People, parents who had strollers were using them. Delivery workers who had little kind of hand trucks or carts or wagons or different things like that were using them. Travelers who had luggage with them. Little kids on scooters. People riding bicycles, right? Everybody started using those. Even people who are not disabled and were on foot would use them because it's easier to walk down that little ramp and walk across the street and walk up the little ramp on the other side. It's easier than trying to step up or down off of a curb. So everybody loves a curb cut. And so that's an example of something that was specifically originally built for people with disabilities that then became widely adopted and used by everyone. And so now we call that the curb cut effect, because that was kind of the first time that it really made an impact for people. But let's look at some other common curb cut effects that we see in digital accessibility. So first up, we have captions on movies, TV shows, online videos, etc. Of course, originally meant for deaf or hard of hearing users so that they could also experience the dialogue that was happening in the film, along with the other sounds happening in the film. But now we see they are wildly popular, especially young people, Gen Z, like almost all of them use captions when they're watching videos. So you might use it because the sound is off, right? Like some of those social media platforms, when there are videos in the feed, they mostly play with the sound off. So the captions are really helpful because you can get an idea of what's happening in the video before you decide if you want to click it or tap it and hear or watch the rest of the video. They're really helpful if you're in a noisy environment and you want to watch a video, right? Like you can still participate in the sound, or like at the opposite end of the spectrum, if you're in a quiet environment where you can't play the audio out loud, maybe you forgot your headphones, you could still watch something on your phone and just use the captions. And then, of course, what got left off the slide was people with different types of neurodivergence actually find it really helpful to see text at the same time that they hear it. It helps with the processing of that text, helps our brains kind of process it faster or in a different way. So we see all kinds of people using captions. And of course, we have a little SEO bonus that if you take the time to caption your videos, that text is then indexable by search engines, right? And you could get a little boost. If you don't caption your video, you don't get that little boost. So we have a little extra benefit from it. Next up, we have voice control, my personal favorite that I use all the time. And this is, if you have some kind of motor disability or fine motor control challenges, can't use a mouse, maybe can't use a keyboard in the traditional way, you can use voice control to operate your computer or your device. And give me just 1 second. I'm going to get a sip of water. All right. So who else uses that now? Well, lots of people like to cook with recipes on their tablets in the kitchen, right? And if you're touching raw chicken, you probably don't want to touch your tablet screen. So you can operate your tablet with your voice. If you're driving and you need to keep your eyes on the road, you can use voice control. My phone car combo, I guess it is, like has this ability for me. So if I'm driving and I need to text my friend, I'm going to be 10 minutes late, I can just talk and say like, hey, text Julie, tell her I'm going to be 10 minutes late. And it'll do that for me. And I don't have to very dangerously, right, like try to use my phone while I'm driving. That is extremely dangerous. Don't ever do it. Right. But I can use my voice to send text messages. And when people text me while I'm driving, it comes and plays through the speakers in the car so I can hear them. It's my favorite because it reads the emojis and it makes me laugh. My friend, one time I was meeting her at a park, and she texted me that she got there before I did, and there was a puppy training class. And I just got this text. It said, "There's a puppy training class, tears of joy," which is my favorite text I've ever received, I think. All right. So anyone who's yelled at a smart speaker, so if you have Siri or Google, whatever you happen to have around, right? If you've talked to it today, like you are using voice control, right? So voice control is something that started as an accessibility feature for just people who had mobility or fine motor control challenges. And it ended up being something that has basically shipped on every consumer electronic device on the planet. So almost every computer, phone, tablet, etc., sold today can be controlled with your voice. All right, keyboard navigation. So for screen reader users who had to navigate without a mouse, or again, users with mobility or fine motor control disabilities who are unable to use a keyboard or a mouse in the traditional way. And I say keyboard navigation because there are, any number of different types of assistive technology devices, different switches, sip and puff devices, and different things that can be controlled with your breath, with a finger, with any part of your body you can move. Essentially, there is going to be a switch device available. So if it's your left big toe, if it's your right knee, if it's your left elbow, right, there's going to be something that you can use to navigate a computer. And as far as the computer is concerned, that is a keyboard, right? So when I say keyboard navigation, I'm largely talking about this wide range of, yes, actual traditional keyboards, but then also assistive technology that basically behaves as a keyboard as far as the computer is concerned. So who else uses this? Power users who can go tap, 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 right through a form and fill it out 10 times faster than having to click each individual field with their mouse. Users who forgot their mouse or their trackpad died or any other kind of issue, right? And then the thing to note about keyboard navigation is that that's built in to HTML. It's pretty much given to you for free. And if it doesn't work on your website, it's because it got broken, right? Out of the box, HTML is fully keyboard accessible. And so if you have a problem, you have to figure out how that got broken and figure out how you can fix it, because it is presenting a real barrier to a significant number of people. All right, let's take a look at prefers reduced motion, which I'm bringing up because not enough people know, not enough developers know about this and know that it is something that they can do. So this is a setting that is at the operating system level that users can set to say, I prefer less motion in general. And setting that setting in, on your Mac or on your PC doesn't actually change anything just by itself, but it provides a setting that then developers who are building websites can query for. And if you have it set, they can give you less motion on the website. So if they're programming different animations or they're playing a video, a full screen background video, they have parallax scrolling or different types of animation that are happening on their website automatically, they are actually able to only do that for users who have not said, please give me less motion, right? And this was originally built for users with vestibular disorders who may have, headaches, dizziness, nausea, and seizures triggered by unwanted motion. But of course, it gets used by lots of other people as well. So people with traumatic brain injuries, people who suffer from migraines, people who just have a low-end device where that animation can't run properly and it's all choppy and weird, or users who have different types of neurodivergence who just find motion incredibly distracting and they just want less of it. So I am going to show you a really ugly slide with just the quick CSS and JavaScript ways that you can detect this and put less motion for people if they have said they want less motion. So if you are adding animations in CSS, please be thoughtful and use this media query for prefers reduced motion. And if they have said they want reduced motion, then either don't run your animation if they have said that, or maybe there's a kind of pared down version of the animation that you could run, because sometimes animations are really helpful for user experience and helping users understand how something's happening. So pare the motion back to just the bare essentials. If you are adding animations in JavaScript, then this is how you would query for that in JavaScript, right? So you're just going to check match media for prefers reduced motion, and then you can put an if-else fork in your JavaScript and only add the animations for the people who don't mind having them, and then let everybody else avoid them. So not enough developers are aware of that. So it's my one technical slide in this talk. Thank you for bearing with me while I presented that, my PSA for the day. All right, let's go on to the next thing, which is dark mode. All right, so dark mode was originally introduced for people who might have light sensitivity, photophobia, or migraines. Who else uses it? People who are working at night, people trying to use a computer in a dark room who don't want the, bright white glow of the computer lighting up their face, making them look ghostly in Zoom calls, right? Or like we see, about 80% of smartphone users have their devices in dark mode. So people definitely have a strong preference for dark mode. Although I do find that the preference for kind of dark and light mode is like a trend. And like people will really like dark mode for a while and then they really like light mode for a while. So right now we're in a dark mode trend for sure, with all those people using it. And then we also have a related mode, which is high contrast mode, available on Windows or Mac, which is similar but slightly different, that just ensures that there is a maximum amount of contrast in the design. So no, light gray text on a white background. No, high contrast mode is going to completely take over, give you a dark background with brightly colored text, often yellow or green, but it's configurable, right? That's going to really stand out on that dark background. And that's really helpful for people with low vision. And it is related to dark mode, but not quite the same thing. All right, quickly go through some other things that you've probably used that were originally assistive technology. Audiobooks, right? Originally for blind users because they were cheaper and faster to make than Braille books. And I remember I worked at a university and they definitely hired students to read textbooks into recordings so that other students who were in the class who were blind had a way of reading the textbook. Who uses audiobooks now? It is a $7 billion industry. And we see celebrities getting hired, and we see books even getting turned into like old timey radio plays with like different actors playing different roles. And it is really, really popular. People love an audiobook, right? They love being able to read a book while they're doing dishes, while they're driving their car, while they're running the vacuum cleaner, right? Like they can do all kinds of things. And read all kinds of business books and novels, and you can participate in all kinds of things. OXO Good Grips, originally designed for an audience of people with arthritis who needed to be able to use cooking utensils. I don't have arthritis. I own a lot of OXO Good Grip stuff. I don't know about you, but I really like it. I really love the can opener. That's one of my favorites. They're sold in Williams-Sonoma. They're sold everywhere now. And so many people own these products, even if they have arthritis or not. Touch screens, originally invented to help people with motor accessibility issues, and are now basically every phone and tablet, and some even laptops and PCs, right? So touch screens are everywhere. People really like them. And my favorite is always when there's a public screen somewhere of some kind that's not a touch screen, but then you can see like fingerprints all over it because people are trying to use it as a touch screen because we're so accustomed to that now. Email, SMS, right? Originally designed for deaf users to communicate, but now are the main ways that we communicate with people around the world. Automatic doors and ramps, originally built for wheelchair users and similar to the curb cuts used for people with luggage, with strollers, with hand carts, with wagons, all different kinds of things, really helpful for people who are having, a situational disability, because if you're carrying something heavy or you're having to pull a heavy cart behind you, right, you're going to get tired more quickly. You're more likely to fall. You're more likely to hurt yourself. And so having a little assistance is going to help you in that situation. All right. So when you build something accessible, this is the pattern that you're tapping into. This curb cut effect is what you're tapping into. So you're widening the market and you're improving your product for everyone who uses it. It's not something that's just for this one small group. It's something that makes the product better for literally everyone. All right, so now that we have this understanding of who benefits from accessibility, what does this actually change? So first up, it lets us think of accessible design, accessible development as quality rather than a checklist. If captions are helpful to literally everyone, captions aren't an accessibility feature, right? They're just the way that we do video. If keyboard navigation is helpful to everybody, it's not assistive technology, it's just navigation. And I want to also caution you against the trap of, well, let's build a separate version that's accessible. Because sometimes people want to do something that they feel like it's not possible to make accessible. And then they say, oh, well, maybe we could just do a separate version that's accessible. That's a trap. It's never a good idea. You want to find a way to take what you're doing and make it accessible for everyone so everybody can participate. What is going to start happening almost immediately if you build a separate accessible version is that the accessible version will start to decay. It will not be kept up to date with the regular version. Features will ship, new content will be added to the main version, right? And the accessible version will languish. So never fall into that trap. All right, the next thing this changes, you can test with what you have. You benefit from accessibility, whether you identify as a disabled person or not. So you can start testing for it. You don't have to go hire a company to spend thousands of dollars to get a full accessibility audit. I mean, you can, but you don't have to get started. Use your own keyboard. See, can you work your forms on your website? Can you navigate around your website? Can you get to things? Can you activate buttons? If you watch a video on your site with the sound off, are the captions correct? Are the captions there? Do they exist at all? All the computers now, like all the devices have some kind of voice control on them. Like open it up, give it a try. Does it work? Can you get around your site using it? Go outside on a bright sunny day like today for me here in LA, right? And look at and try to use your phone. Like try to go to your website. Is there sufficient contrast? Are you actually able to see things on the screen, even though there's really bright sunlight around? There's all different kinds of ways that you can actually test your own things just with what you have right now. You don't have to buy anything. You could get some free tools. You could download some free accessibility scanners and things like that to help you out. And then next is to use the platform. So HTML and CSS were designed to be accessible by default. And the times when we see accessibility fail, it tends to be things that have gotten messed up in the design or development process. So we took something that was accessible by default and we did something. We took something out or we added something that didn't need to be there. And now we've created an inaccessible experience. So be aware of semantic HTML and the ways that you can get accessibility for free when you take advantage of it and use it, and really become knowledgeable about how far you can push those semantic HTML elements, because some of them can be styled more than you might think. Because I feel like a lot of developers will default to building out a custom checkbox, a custom select, and different things like that, rather than use the semantic element because they feel like the native element can't be styled to look the way the designer said it should look. But I would challenge you in 2026 to really look into that, because there have been a lot of advances in styling those native semantic elements, and they are more flexible than you might think. So always try to see if you can use that semantic default native HTML element first. All right, let's take a look at the Web A Million again, and we'll look at the top failures that survey uncovers. So here they are in order, the top 6 failures. They have been the top 6 failures since 2019. So every year we get the same top 6 failures, and they are these. The order might change slightly from year to year, but this is pretty much what the top 6 have been 7 years running. Well, I guess it'd be 8 years running. So low contrast text. 83.9% of homepages have text that doesn't have sufficient contrast, right? Because people love to put a light gray text on a white background, or vice versa, a light gray background with white text. It's very trendy, or a lot of pastel colors with white text, right? So that's just choosing colors in CSS that don't have enough contrast. That's pretty easy to fix. Missing alt text on images. So 53.1%, over half of home pages had this problem. That's just a missing alt attribute on an image. Missing form labels, 51%. So again, over half. And that's just a missing label element. Should be on all of their forms. Pretty easy to add. Little code. Probably for most platforms, probably a little bit of code. Sometimes that might be something you could do in a WYSIWYG editor. Alt attribute is probably something you can do in a WYSIWYG editor. All right, empty links. So 46.3% with empty links. So an A tag with no text inside. And what this usually is, in case you think that sounds kind of weird, what that usually is it's somebody is trying to use probably some kind of little icon as a link, right? So like click this little icon to go, like click a little house, right, to go to the homepage. But they don't put alt text on the house. And so then you end up with what is essentially an empty link because there's no text content inside there that tells me what that link does. So that's what that one usually is. And then closely related to the next one down, empty buttons. So it's likely the same thing, is a button that just has an icon on it, but it doesn't have any text. So that's 30.6% of home pages. So it could be like your submit button on a form. It could be different things. I think what it would often be is a close button or a toggle button of some kind for toggling like a carousel to go to the next slide, for toggling an accordion open or closed, right? It's probably a button there that either opens or closes things. It has an icon, right? Like a little arrow icon or something, but no text. And then the last one, which really surprises me, is the missing document language, which 13.5%, more than 1 in 10, right? Missing the lang attribute on the HTML. Yes, that is a little codey, but very easy to add. And there's just one HTML element per page. And it surprises me because I feel like most websites these days are built on some kind of content management system, and those really ought to be putting that lang attribute in there for you. But here we are, 13.5% are missing the language. And why that's important is that if I have a page written in Spanish, but my computer is, right, my computer is set to English because that's my main language. When a screen reader lands on that page, it doesn't know what language it is. So it's going to assume it's English because that's my system setting. And it's going to try to read Spanish with the English library. And it doesn't sound right, right? Like it's not understandable. So you want to take anything that you have and indicate what language it's in, because it helps computers to understand how they should read it, how they should pronounce things, what the meanings of different words are, right? Because there's a lot of cases where there's the same word, but it's in different languages and it means completely different things. So just to give that indication of what the language is. So looking over this list of things, a couple are a little bit codey, but most of them are actually things that you could probably do in your content management system. None of them require you to have deep knowledge of ARIA. None of them require any kind of framework. They're all really easy to fix. These are all like the 6 most common issues are all really easy to fix. 3 of them, missing alt text, empty links, and empty buttons, right? The most likely fix is just adding alt text onto an image, which you should be able to do in pretty much any content management system. So the bar is really low, is what I'm letting you know. These are all really easy to fix, even if you're not super technical. Take a look at your own website and see if you can get these fixed, which brings me to the 3 things that you can do to celebrate GAAD. 3 things you can do on your own website this week. You don't have to wait. You can do it right now. You could do it right after this live stream. You could do it tomorrow during, if you want to do it on official GAAD. You could do it Friday. You could do it over the weekend if you're too busy. But here we are. 3 things. Number 1, one page. So pick one page of your website and test it with just your keyboard and make sure that it works. Make sure you can see where your focus is. Make sure the focus happens in the right order. Make sure that you can work everything. If you have a carousel, can you switch slides with just your keyboard? If you have an accordion, can you open or close the panels of the accordion with just your keyboard? So try that out. One page of your site. The number 2, pick one video. So pick one video, preferably your most watched video, your most popular video. Check the captions. Does it have them? And are they accurate? Or are they just the auto-generated ones you get for free when you upload to YouTube that are like 70% correct? So if you didn't know, you can edit those. You can open up your video in YouTube Studio and you can edit those captions to make them correct. So please take the time to do that. If you are just using the auto-generated ones, try that out. Okay, and then number 3, one form, because most websites have at least one form, right? Usually you have at least that contact us form on the contact page. Test it out with just your keyboard. Can you fill it out? Do all the labels have visible, or all the fields rather have visible labels? Can I see where focus is as I tab through the fields? And if I try to submit the form with incorrect information, right, like a badly formed email address in the email field, or I leave my name blank, do I get back an error message that actually helps me understand what's wrong and how to fix it? So 3 things you can do this week to celebrate GAAD. All right. Well, that was almost perfectly timed. I tried to do these for an hour. We're at 58 minutes. All right, I'm checking. I don't see any questions that have come in from anybody during the stream. If you have any, go ahead and share them now. I'll stick around for a couple more minutes, and I'm happy to answer any questions anybody has. Like I said, I'll share the link to my slides. It's just a Google slide deck. Well, I guess you can see that on the screen a little bit. It is just a Google slide deck, and I will share that, and it does have, I go all the way to the end, we have our key takeaways from today, which I'll do while I wait to see if there's any questions. Key takeaways from today. Accessibility isn't for a small group of other people, right? It's for permanent, temporary, and situational disability, which is everyone at some point or another. The curb cut effect is the rule, not the exception. So features that were built for people in the permanent disability column become defaults for the rest of us. We use those without even thinking about it. And third, you don't have to do a big thing. You don't got to go spend $10,000 on an audit for somebody. You can do some testing yourself and figure it out and fix something. Every little thing you fix is another barrier that gets removed. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you. Have a great day. Thank you for joining me today. All right, and then also there's the resources slide at the end. So accessibility.day is the official GAAD homepage. If you want to learn more about that persona spectrum, that comes from Microsoft Inclusive Design. We have Accessibility Perspectives videos, the Web 8 Million, the CDC, the World Health Organization, and a book called Mismatch by Kat Holmes that I all highly recommend. All right, and I just see Patrick saying thanks. No other questions have come in. Let me just double check because sometimes LinkedIn is a little bit weird. Nope, looks good. All right, well, thank you so much for joining me today. Happy Global Accessibility Awareness Day tomorrow. Do something to make your own online presence a little bit more accessible tomorrow to celebrate, and tell 3 other people about web accessibility so we can help spread the word. All right, I'll see you 2 weeks from today for the next live stream. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a wonderful GAAD, wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.